In 1086, the clerks of William the Conqueror counted England's woods. They wrote down woodland the way they wrote down mills and oxen as machinery. And the numbers they logged were frightening. Barely a seventh of England was trees. Everything ran on wood: houses, plows, fences, and every single fire. A country like that should strip itself bare within a generation. England did the opposite. The same villages cut fuel from the same woods for 500 years, and the woods never ran out. Today, a country with power stations burns millions of tons of imported wood a year. A medieval village burned its own forever from a circle it could walk in an afternoon. The secret was not restraint. It was the axe. Cutting these trees is the reason some of them are still alive today, 1,000 years on. Tonight we build that system one problem at a time, from a single stump to a wood that outlived its empire. So how does a village burn a forest for 5 centuries? You start with a problem of simple arithmetic. And the arithmetic says the village dies. Fell an oak for the fire and its replacement is an acorn. That acorn needs 60, 80, sometimes 100 years to become the tree you just burned in a winter. A family needs a fire every single day. A village of 30 families needs a mountain of fuel every single year. Plant and Wait loses that race so badly it is not even worth running. And the fire was only the beginning of the appetite. The bread oven wanted fast-burning bundles of brushwood. The brewer wanted fuel for every batch of ale, and ale was the daily drink. Lime kilns ate wood to make the mortar that held up churches. Salt pans boiled brine over wood fires for days at a stretch. Add the fences, the plows, the harrows, the carts, the house frames, and the hurdles that penned every flock of sheep in the country. And nearly every object in a medieval village that was not food, stone, or iron was wood. If that world had worked the way we picture a forest working, chop it down, wait for nature, England's trees would have vanished before the cathedrals were finished. The way out was not invented, it was noticed. Cut down a hazel, an ash, an oak, a willow, or a lime, and the tree does something that still surprises people the first time they see it. It refuses to die. The stump sits there through one winter and then it erupts. A ring of new shoots leaps up around the cut, 5, 10, 20 of them, and they do not grow at seedling pace. They grow with the full force of an adult root system behind them. A root system that may have taken half a century to build and lost none of its power when the trunk came off. Shoots from a cut stump can put on 6 feet in a single season. In 7 to 10 years, they are poles as thick as your arm. Cut those and the stump simply does it again. And again, there is no meaningful limit. The trick works because broadleaf trees carry an insurance policy we rarely see. Under the bark of the stump and along the roots sit thousands of dormant buds, held asleep for decades by the living crown above them. Remove the crown and the signal that suppressed them vanishes. The whole reserve wakes at once and sprints for the light, drawing on everything the roots have stored. The workers who lived off this reflex refined it into technique. They cut in winter when the tree's energy was banked below ground. They cut low and clean at an angle so rain would run off the stump instead of pooling and rotting it. And they learned each species like a customer. Hazel came back fast and straight, ready in about 7 years. Ash and oak took longer and paid in heavier poles. Willow barely seemed to notice being cut at all. What grew back was called underwood, and underwood, not timber, was the crop most woods actually existed to produce. The practice is called coppicing, from a French word for a blow of the axe. The cut stump is called a stool. It is not a medieval invention. When archaeologists lifted a wooden walkway out of the peat of the Somerset levels, a track built across the marshes nearly 6,000 years ago, they found it was made from coppice poles cut to size from stumps that Stone Age hands had been harvesting on rotation. Medieval England did not discover the trick, it industrialized it. But the moment you have a field of tender young shoots, you have created a new problem. And this one has teeth. To a deer, a freshly cut coppice is a banquet laid out at exactly mouth height. Cattle, sheep, and goats feel the same way. One season of browsing kills the regrowth. Enough seasons of it kill the stool. The axe never killed these woods. Teeth could. So the villages fortified their fuel, and they did it with the seriousness of people defending a granary. Medieval coppices were ringed with earthen banks the size of small ramparts, topped with fences or laid hedges, with a ditch dug on the outside so a browsing animal faced a climb, and a barrier in one motion. That engineering outlived its builders. English woods are still veined with these wood banks today, soft green ridges you can trip over centuries after the last warden walked them. Archaeologists read them like property deeds because the bank marks exactly where a managed wood began. Inside, each freshly cut panel got its own guard. a dead hedge of woven brushwood built from the very tops and trimmings of the trees just felled. A fence grown, cut, and rebuilt on site. Straying beasts were serious business. Manor courts fined their owners, and the fines sit in the rolls beside cases of debt and assault, because a cow loose in the spring regrowth was arson in slow motion. Where grazing animals had a right to share the ground, the workers simply moved the cut out of reach. Lop the tree at head height instead of at the ankle, and the shoots spring from up there, above the tallest muzzle. That version is called pollarding, and it is why old parks and hedges are full of trees with fists of branches on top of short, fat trunks. Same trick, different altitude. Wood and meat off the same acre and neither one at the other's expense. Protected and regrowing, the wood now presents problem 3, and it is a scheduling problem. If the village cuts everything this winter, it has a glut this year and nothing at all for the next 7. Fires do not take years off. So the village made the one decision that turned a trick into a system. Divide the wood into panels. Cut one panel each winter in strict order. And by the time you reach the last one, the first has grown back. The panels were called coups, and the wood became a wheel that turned once every 7 to 20 years, delivering a harvest every single winter forever. Walk a working coppice and you walked through time zones. This year's bare stools, last year's waist-high shoots, 7-year rods ready for the hook, all standing in neat blocks. The village did not own a forest, it owned a slow machine with a dial on it. And every age on that dial had a buyer waiting. 2-year rods bent into binders for hedging and thatch. 7-year hazel split into wattle for walls and woven into hurdles. The portable fencing that moved every sheepfold in England around its pastures. Straight ash for rake handles and plow beams. Springy poles for scaffolding. Blocky offcuts for clogs and bowls. Twigs bundled into besoms and brooms. The fire itself took 2 grades. Thick billets for the long burn, and tight bundles of brushwood sold by the hundred to bakers and brewers who wanted a fast, roaring flame under an oven. Follow a single stool through one cycle and almost nothing left that wood is waste. Even the final trimmings went into the dead hedge guarding the next coop. The system did not just renew itself, it consumed itself completely, on purpose, every single year. The records that survive treat all of it with the seriousness of a bank ledger because that is what it was. 13th century manor accounts price underwood by the acre, log sales year by year, and on some manors an acre of well-run coppice out-earned an acre of plowland. That is the kind of number that makes accountants sit up. A wood was dowry material in abbey endowment. Towns pulled barge after barge of billets up their rivers from coppices that specialized in feeding urban fires. Firewood was not scrap, it was revenue. And revenue is the real reason these woods survived. Nobody needed to preach conservation at a medieval landlord. Felling a coppice for one big payday and losing the yearly income forever was simply bad business. So the woods were guarded, banked, recorded, and passed down like the assets they were. Which brings us to the strangest thing the axe was doing. The secret nobody swinging it ever knew. A tree that keeps its trunk ages the way we do. It grows, peaks, declines, and dies. Even the great oaks rarely see 1,000 years. But a tree that loses its trunk on a rhythm never finishes that story. Every cut resets it to vigorous youth, while the root system underneath just keeps spreading. The stool grows outward into a ring. The ring gets wider century by century. And the tree simply declines to die. Botanists measuring the giant lime and ash stools of English woods, rings of trunks yards across with hollow middles you can stand in, put their ages over 1,000 years, with some estimates running toward 2,000. Older than the cathedrals. Older than England as a kingdom. Ecologists hunting for Britain's oldest living things keep arriving again and again. Not at the famous protected giants, but at working stumps. The most heavily exploited trees on the island became its most ancient life. Not despite 500 years of cutting, because of it. Sit with how backwards that is. Every instinct we have about protecting nature says the way to keep a tree alive is to leave it alone. These woods ran the opposite experiment for 1,000 years. Harvest after harvest on the same roots, and produced organisms that may outlast every untouched tree in Europe. The villagers were not trying to make immortal trees. They were trying to make January warm. Immortality was a side effect of rent day. And you can still put your hands on this world, which is exactly the point of it. If this makes you want to grab a piece of the past instead of just watching it, that is the whole idea behind the Medieval Way store. It starts with the Medieval Bakery Collection. The Practical Recipes book walks you through real medieval dishes. The Sourdough Manual is for building and keeping a living leaven the old way. and the sourcing guide shows you where the right heritage grain still grows. But while the coppice was feeding every hearth in the village, something far hungrier was standing in the trees. Iron, a smith's forge, and a smelting furnace need temperatures an open wood fire cannot reach. And the answer was charcoal. Wood baked in sealed, smoldering clamps until only near-pure carbon remains. Making it was its own dark craft. The colliers stacked coppice poles into a dome, skinned it with turf and earth until almost no air could pass, lit it from the center, and then lived beside it in the wood for a week or more, sleeping in turf huts, watching the smoke change color, because 1 hour of too much air turned 7 days of work into a heap of ordinary ash. Their leveled burning platforms still hide by the hundred under the leaf litter of old coppice woods, black-earthed circles that archaeologists mapped the way they map cottages. Whole regions ran heavy industry on this fuel, iron country like the Weald in England's southeast. And the remarkable part is what the industry did not do. It did not eat the forests. Where furnaces were fed from managed coppice, the ironmasters needed next year's cut as badly as the village did. So they ran their fuel grounds on the same wheel, panel by panel, year by year. A furnace could draw on the same circle of woods for generations. It was renewable energy running heavy industry at scale 400 years before anyone felt the need for the term. And the proof is that the woods of the old iron districts are still standing. 500 years is a big claim, so let it stand on a named example. Bradfield Woods in Suffolk appears in the records of Bury St. Edmund's Abbey as managed coppice in the year 1252. The abbey's clerks logged its sales. The wood fed the abbey's fires, fenced its fields, and earned its rents cycle after cycle while dynasties changed above it. It was still being cut on rotation when the 20th century arrived. It survived a close call with the bulldozers in the 1960s, and volunteers cut it on rotation now, panel by panel, the old way. Not 500 years in the end, closer to 800 on the same ground from many of the same stools. A woodworker from the reign of Henry III could walk into a coop at Bradfield this winter and pick up the work in an afternoon. And the wood would not notice the 7 centuries between shifts. So what finally stopped a machine that could run forever? Not exhaustion. The woods were fine. What died was the demand. Coal crept into the hearths and the coppice lost the fire. Iron makers switched to coke and it lost the furnace. Wire fences replaced wattle. Sawn timber and steel replaced poles. Plastics replaced almost everything else. And the buyers for 2-year binders and 7-year rods simply stopped existing, product by product, decade by decade. By the middle of the 20th century, the wheel had stopped turning across most of Britain, and stools that had been cut on schedule since the Plantagenets stood waiting for an axe that never came back. Up to that point, the system had been winning for 8 centuries. The flip took roughly 2 generations. Here's the part nobody expected. Stopping the axe did not save these woods, it began killing them. A working coppice is a wood full of weather. Every winter's cut throws a new panel open to the sky, and the response is immediate. The first spring after cutting, the kupi detonates into flower. Bluebells, primroses, wood anemones, violets. Feeding on sunlight, the closed canopy had rationed for a decade. Butterflies follow the flowers. Nightingales nest in the thicket of year 3 regrowth. Dormice run the hazel like a road network. The entire community is timed to the wheel of cutting, and it had 1,000 years to set its clocks. Then the cutting stopped and the lights went out. An abandoned coppice grows up dense and dark. The neglected stools stretch tall and heavy until they split apart under their own weight. And the species that lived on the bright open cycle starve in the shade. Wood by wood, decade by decade. Conservation surveys keep finding the same uncomfortable result. The richest life in an Old English wood clings to the panels where cutting continued and vanishes where it stopped. For 1,000 years, the axe was not the threat to these places, it was the life support. Which is why the fix is refreshingly simple and small enough for a backyard. Coppicing has come back as conservation work and as craft, and the skill fits in an afternoon. Plant a hazel, give it a few years, then cut every stem to a hand's width above the ground in winter while the plant sleeps. It will not die, it will multiply. And every few winters after that, it will hand you bean poles, pea sticks, plant supports, and firewood off the same root for the rest of your life, and well past it. Cut on the slant so the stump sheds rain. Keep the deer and rabbits off the first-year shoots, and you have already mastered the entire medieval curriculum. If you have no garden, the working coppices that survive run volunteer days every winter, and they will put a billhook in your hand. One plant, one old rule, an endless supply. The village machine scaled down to a garden. There is a quiet lesson buried in all of this, and it is not that the past was wiser. It is that permanence came from use. The one relationship that reliably kept a wood standing through 800 hungry winters was needing it again next year. A wood that earned its keep had guardians, banks, ledgers, and a schedule. A wood that didn't had only sentiment, and sentiment does not sharpen a billhook. The stools at Bradfield are still throwing shoots this year on schedule, waiting for the axe that keeps them young. We dig up the systems that kept ordinary villages alive. Subscribe for more. Which surprised you most? The immortal stumps, the woodland bank ledgers, or the charcoal furnaces? Stay curious.